Welcome to Scale Up Soundbites, where we discuss bite-sized ideas to help you scale up your team and scale up your career. Today, I'm joined with Dave Bolton, who is CTO, who has been CTO or Head of Technology or Head of Engineering for many well-known Australian brands such as Westfield, News Corp, ING, WooliesX, and most recently Domain. Dave's here today to give us some insight into what it takes to become a CTO, and more specifically, the level of business acumen needed to get these positions. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sam. We're just reminiscing. We've known each other for well over a decade now, I think, from one of those earlier brands. And great to be on this show. And it's been an idea of yours for many years.
Mate, time flies, I tell you what. It is, it has been an innings, I would say. All right, cool. Let's go back. Why did you choose to become a CTO?
Well, I think, first thing, I didn't choose that necessarily. I might almost say it chose me. So I wouldn't have said that I started my career with the goal of, hey, I want to be a chief technology officer. In fact, I probably wasn't even aware of that as a title or a potential ambition. I was an engineer. I just wanted to be good at my job. I was very keen on learning as much as I could. And technology excited me. So over time, what happened, and I think this would be a reasonably common story for people, is that I would end up in leadership positions, not intentionally, at least in the first half of my career. It wasn't intentional. It was just, hey, Dave seems to be, a natural leader of some sort, or Dave is just falling into that position, and so now he's going to be a team leader. And over and over until at some point I realised it was when I was at Westfield, and I got on the Westfield management track, which was full of the leasing and construction executives, and they put a technologist in there too. And I realised, and technology as an industry hasn't done a good job of developing leaders over time. I think it has been a lot of accidental leadership. So through sitting with those people, I realised, leadership is actually something that you can work very hard at and get better at. It's not just something, you're a natural leader or you're not. It's something that you can read the books about. You can learn from people who've done all this stuff before, and you can get good at it. So when I started becoming a bit more intentional about it, then I thought, okay, well, I've got this capability. I think I can do some of the jobs that are available pretty well. And that just sort of, snowballs into other things, and you get the opportunities. But it wasn't initially ever a plan, I'm going to do this, or this is my goal. It's more wanting to be good at your job, taking opportunities as they come up, and then through that combination of things, you get some good chances to practice what your craft, I guess.
Yeah, right. So there's a bit of luck associated in your
A lot of luck.
Yeah.
I've been incredibly lucky in my career.
Yeah. Oh, how good. Okay. Well, back to specifically around the topic that we're trying to discuss here around commercial skills and experience. What do you believe are specific commercial skills necessary to be a successful CTO, and how have you developed these skills in your own career?
So it's important when you're in a senior technology leadership job, particularly if you're in the executive team and you represent the whole function, to be able to be part of the discussion about the business. So I say a key factor of these roles is technologists need to see themselves as business leaders in these senior roles. I'm a business leader who happens to have a technology background.
Yeah.
Not just, hey, I'm in technology and I'll sit around some business people and try and figure out what they're saying. And I think that's a really critical distinction, because when you think about yourself as a business leader, then you realise, I have to understand this stuff. I might have to acquire skills that I didn't have before. Now, how did that happen for me? I guess this is probably one of the fortunate accidental things, is that when I went to university, I studied part computer science and part business subjects.
Yep.
I've always had a fascination with business. I did an MBA in sort of it took me a while, but in my mid-20s through to early 30s. And so that interest and curiosity about business, that learning skills, and then just paying a lot of attention in the organisations I was in, gave me a baseline where I can say, hey, I've got great commercial acumen. And let me tell you that is something that non-technology leaders are looking for. They want to work with people who've got that commercial acumen, who can have that strategic, business-led discussion and be part of how we're going to create a great business, or what do we have to do to win here, where part of the answer might be technology, but actually understanding how to apply technology to business problems is a bigger benefit to the organisation. So for me, it came about through, again, somewhat unintentional. It was more through curiosity and, again, taking opportunities to learn or exploring the MBA. I certainly didn't do an MBA thinking, oh, well, this is going to get me this job in the future. I did it because kind of because it was just there and because I have an interest in business, and I thought, oh, this might be useful. So that's how it happened for me, but there's lots of different ways to get there.
Yep.
In terms of specific skills, which is something you asked about, and I've done this with lots of teams in the past, you need to be able to understand a profit and loss statement, balance sheet, and these are things that, we can talk about how you acquire these skills, but simple but really critical things of, well, how are you measuring a business? So any public company, you can go and look at their P&L and their balance sheet. It's part of their annual report.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I say to people is, if you want to acquire some of these skills that are going to be useful for your future career, spend time doing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So those skills, so understanding a profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, they sound like they're available for free. You don't need to study an MBA. You don't need to have a background in business or management studies. You can actually access that information and just read it up yourself.
Yeah, you can access the information. You can certainly read it. Look, if you grab 10 annual reports for 10 Australian companies and looked at the numbers, you would go, okay, I don't know what to do with these.
Yeah.
But even just by comparing the scale of the numbers, this company's talking about billions of dollars of assets, but this company seems to have less assets. Why is that? And I think if you've got a curiosity about things like that, you can start asking good questions. And I think by itself, you might struggle just with getting those annual reports, but the curiosity to say why, why are the ratios between assets and liabilities across these companies different? That'll lead to good questions. How would I find that out? Okay, I might have to go and do some research.
Yeah.
And the other great source for getting commercial acumen is, and probably the best source, is the company you're in right now.
Okay.
And for me, if you're an engineer and you go and talk to, say, someone in the sales team and say, hey, I want to know more about how we make money, you'll have an audience. Salespeople love to talk. They'll probably be very happy that you're interested in how the business runs. So that's probably the first port of call is, do I really understand how my current business runs, how we make money, what success looks like, what our current trajectory is. Very easy questions to have. You can have a coffee with someone in the organisation and they'll explain it to you.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's actually probably a great first step for people who are in tech roles, and you don't even have to be in a leadership role there. You can just be in a software engineering degree, in a software engineering role or development role, and just want to understand more about the business and how it operates, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think got to be, sometimes you can be a little bit cursed by a little bit of knowledge. I think the idea of, well, I'll understand how the business works. I'll stay curious and humble about the knowledge that I'm acquiring, because I think if there's one thing that's been a hallmark of technology over the last 10 years, it's almost the hubris of technologists to think they can solve any problem with technology. And so I think you've got to be a little bit careful to stay humble while you're acquiring this knowledge. But just a mindset of curiosity, asking people, trying to understand how we make money, what are the critical factors to our success, would stand you in good stead.
Yeah, okay, cool. And it sounded like, you've used the word accidental, and curious is coming up a lot in what you're speaking here. And it sounds like that curiosity is often sort of like run in the background through your studies and your career. So doing the split between business and tech in your studies, and then the curiosity of the MBA side of things. I guess with your opinion, let's move on to the next question. How does that, so if you weren't to go do a MBA, But let's say you've started to also, have these conversations with your current company. What other things can you do outside of that could help you sort of
well, let's
gain that
address
information?
good question. We'll address the MBA thing first because
Yep.
I get asked about it a lot by technologists. Hey, Dave, you've got an MBA. Do I need to have an MBA to be successful in my career? And the answer to that is absolutely not. I did this when I had no applicability for the things I was learning. I was just curious about it, to your point.
Yeah.
And I mean, the honest truth is I've probably forgotten most of the stuff that I would have learnt at that point. I wrote a bunch of essays. I learnt about some subjects that were somewhat interesting, but actually not necessarily that useful for a technology career. So like the mechanics of what I was doing at that time, one of my first subjects was project management. Right now, as an MBA, that could be useful, but guess what? In software development, we've been using Agile for a long time, very successfully, and so a lot of the stuff I learned just didn't make sense. It wasn't useful. It might be useful if you're building a building or a bridge or something like that, but it just wasn't that useful. So, don't need to do an MBA. It was more a salve for my curiosity about business, and I did get some stuff out of it, maybe more in the strategic thinking than just pure commercial acumen. But there is an indicator there of something. Now, if you're not going to do that and you don't need to, what are the other sources of this stuff? I'd say read the business pages of the newspaper. Just look at what's happening in the economy generally, because we've got very interesting economic circumstances at the moment. Inflation's high, interest rates are high, and so companies are challenged in a whole bunch of ways, and we've seen that with tech layoffs and layoffs generally. Well, why is that? We've still got a whole bunch of very profitable tech companies. Facebook is laying off people, but it's not like they're suddenly not making money out of ads, similarly with Google and whatnot. So what are they doing? Why are they, that curiosity around, well, what's happening in the economy right now? How might that affect my company? What might that mean for the tech industry? I think that you can learn a lot about business by exploring those avenues as well. And I come back to that evergreen question of how do we or how do other companies make money? So interesting questions that might come off that are, okay, well, we make money in this way. What's our margin?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I think these sort of perspectives where you go, okay, we happen to make money in the billions, but we've got a very low margin.
Yep.
That might mean, okay, well that will mean that profitability will be a lower proportion of overall revenue. A lot of digital companies, and so say when I worked at Woolworths, that was a factor. You're selling physical goods and the margin's very low. So a multi-billion-dollar e-commerce company deals with a lot of physical product. It deals with a lot of transactions, but the ultimate profitability is relatively low. It's but because you've got such a large number you start with, it's still a very good business to be in. Whereas in a lot of digital product type organizations, the margin can be much higher because you're selling a digital product. So, Google will have great margin on it. It has to invest a lot in infrastructure and whatnot, but it'll have great margin on its advertising because what does it cost to sell one more ad? Basically nothing.
Yeah.
So understanding those sort of levers and mechanics is a great way just to build that understanding of your current business and heighten your level of commercial acumen.
Yeah. And I think I remember when you're talking about things that, especially in tech companies that are of scale, when you're talking about that product ability. I remember I used to work for a pretty advanced company when I first started before I got into recruitment, and for me being a salesperson for them, it got me thinking was like, when you said one more sale, the price that I sold the product on didn't really change. So if I sold it to one person or if I sold it to 100, it was still the same price. So the profitability that they would have made on that 100th sale would have been so much more than that first sale.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How do you measure success of your technology initiatives that you've implemented for the companies you've worked for? And is it necessarily the same or different to how the company would measure it?
It's a good question. So you mentioned technology initiatives implemented. I actually look at technology in an organization is you will have technology assets And initiatives are things that will generally improve the asset or add to the asset in some way. A really important job for a CTO is to understand, well, what are our assets? Are they fit for purpose? So are they the right sort of asset? Are they working well? Do they operate well? And thinking about the asset base and its suitability is one of the chief jobs of a technology executive. But it might be a little bit different to how other people in the organisation see technology. For them, technology is sort of a means to an end to get another sale or something like that. So they may not think about the asset so much, and it's the executive's job to represent that asset and to talk about it, but they may not think about it as much, and that's natural. It's their job. They may be thinking more about the incremental aspects of that asset. So if we add this new feature, I can get that extra sale.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, an initiative might be a more have a higher currency than, hey, we've got this asset, we've had it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
They may not be thinking about that because it just exists. So the executive needs to be thinking about the asset, while other people may think about the initiative and measure success on that. For me, when I think about that asset and measuring success, firstly, is it fit for purpose? And one analogy that I've come up with to talk and think about this is, if we've got a hotel, it could be the best built hotel in the world. It could be very, very good, but if it's built for ski conditions, it's got I don't know much about skiing, but it's got like a snow room and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's no good if you put it down on Bondi Beach because there's no snow around there.
Fair.
So having an asset that is very good, and technologists, we like, we love our craft. We want to build things, but they've got to be appropriate for the problem at hand. So building the world's best ski resort next to Bondi Beach might have all sorts of elegant solutions. It might have the best snow room and I don't know, sauna and all those sorts of things. But if they're not needed for that problem space, then it's actually not a good asset. So understanding what your assets are they the right sort of assets? Then do they operate well?
Right.
Is our hotel, it might be physically very good, but if the staff are terrible at their jobs, if they keep upsetting the customers, then it's not run very well. And that's, again, the ski resort next to Bondi Beach might have great staff, and so maybe people enjoy going to it just for the novelty of it. But so we're thinking about those things are very important. Now, the company may go, okay, assume we've got the right asset for what we're trying to do. It's run pretty well. Then they're probably going to be thinking more in that incremental sense of, okay, well, how do we add something else to what this asset does?
Yeah. So,
for instance, we're serving all of our hotel customers breakfast. Maybe we should open this up for lunch. And so again, the success for them might be more targeted than looking at the whole asset. But the technologist and particularly the executive level people need to be thinking about, okay, is the asset working?
Yeah.
Is it the right asset? Is it well run? And then the incremental things, the initiatives that you mentioned before, for me, come after that.
Yeah, okay, cool. So like the day-to-day processes, whether it's the right asset that you have, so the right products that you have, and could that relate back to the technology you're using to build these assets, or does that go back to the I guess the way it's sort of run?
Look, the technology choices, we know technology choices over time, things get out of date.
Yeah, of course.
And I think if you were to have been building something in the last 10 years, you'll probably have somewhat of a sense of how are we going to evolve this architecture, how are we going to evolve this technology as times change. If you've got something from earlier times, that can be hard. You might have to completely rebuild something. But technology choices are important.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. As a CTO or at that head of engineering sort of space, head of technology, how do you balance that need for innovation and experimentation when in an ever-changing technology market, to, I guess, the other side of what we're talking about, the commercial need, the ability to manage costs, or that end bottom line to deliver the value to, shareholders of companies like Woolies and these huge companies?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's important because different companies have different tones. And what I mean by the tone is I've said this about Woolies in the past. It's a very successful supermarket chain, been around for about 100 years, and they're very good at running supermarkets. And that's a very operational concern. So if you can't operate that well, people don't eat. And I call it the milk in the fridge and bread on the shelf problem, that if there is not milk in the fridge when you walk in, or there's not bread on the shelf, then that's a problem for the company. And how do they make that work? Well, there's a lot of robust conversation that happens behind the scenes. If the delivery trucks aren't delivering stuff on time, it's a rigorous company in that sense. And that sort of tone isn't really that conducive to innovation. Because I'm not to say that Woolies doesn't innovate. They've done some really cool stuff and are world leading in that sector in a whole bunch of ways. But it makes it harder because the tone is quite operational. It's keeping the milk in the fridge and the bread on the shelf. Whereas there's other organisations where I guess innovation, it's less of the tone is different, and it may be perhaps more open to innovation as just a way of working. And so anyway, I always start with, well, what's the tone of the organisation we're working in? What is, and again, this goes back to commercial acumen, understanding what are our constraints? Are we a highly high margin, highly profitable organisation that might want to, when you're highly profitable, you'll attract competition. It's very hard to maintain that level of profitability forever because other people want a slice of it, which means you need to keep innovating. So taking some of those profits and going, okay, well, we're going to do some really interesting things. And I think if you were to look at an organisation that I worked at, like Westfield, which is now known as Centre Group, very well run company, probably the best at running shopping malls, certainly I would say in Australia, but one of the best globally. And they focused on, well, how do we make our malls a great experience? And for technologists who work there, got to look at some really interesting things about how technology could make that a really good experience, because malls over time have evolved from just a place to go to, well, it's a leisure experience, and so it competes with other things like going to the beach. So the tone of the company, the sector, the level of profitability and ability to reinvest, all the foundations for what sort of innovation is appropriate. Then on top of that, which is your question, how do you manage to balance those things is, well, firstly, the balance, knowing those foundational things is really important, because if you go into a company that has to be very operational because of the margins in the business or some other imperative, then going in there and going, hey, we're going to innovate this and we're going to put 80% of our effort in innovation might not fly. And in fact, you probably lose credibility about your commercial acumen if you're suggesting the wrong thing in the wrong space. So understanding what might be acceptable. Maybe we're putting 10% of our time into innovation because that suits the company. Or maybe we've got a company where 30% is more appropriate because we need to be innovating or else we'll lose customers. That's very important in the balance sense. Now, to actually do innovation is probably a whole other podcast.
Sure.
But I like Eric Schmidt, the ex-CEO of Google, talking about controlled chaos. How do you have just enough control over all the things that are happening so that you can guide that innovation in an appropriate way? But you do need to start with that. Okay, what's the appropriate balance for our organisation, for our business context, which comes back to commercial acumen again.
Yeah, okay, cool. So, and when you're, I like that reference to the controlled chaos, I guess, theories, or I don't know what you call it, but processes, sorry. And yeah, I think that when you are innovating, there's going to be chaos, right? You don't know what's going to happen over that. So if you have that element of what it's kind of got to let go of things that might go wrong, and it's going to cost a bit of money to innovate. But, the risk versus reward type of thing is probably going to be the ultimate thing.
There's a model that I think lots of companies struggle with, which is, do we innovate in what we do every day, or do we innovate as somewhat of a slightly separate thing, and so set up an innovation team or whatnot? And it's hard to have a blueprint and say, well, the right way to do it is this, because again, it depends on the organisation. Sometimes just having that constant innovation in a team that can be really valuable, but sometimes innovation is so important that you have to set it up somewhat separately because it won't exist in every day. And look, Woolies is a great example. Woolworths Group probably would have struggled to do what WooliesX was successful doing because of the milk in the fridge and bread on the shelf problem. So setting up WooliesX, and we begun that in 2017. It started with not just a couple of people. It was, had quite a gravity to attach to it on the very first day, but had to do things that were different that Woolworths had never done, like online e-commerce. So they had been doing that, but had to do it at I guess you'd say, more innovative level than it had been done in the past. It needed to be a bit separate, or it would be swamped by the enormity of Woolworths as an organisation. So that's part of that sort of balance question is, well, actually, how are you going to organise to do it, let alone proportionally what amount of your effort is going to go into innovation.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So really,
look, there's other organisations where just making that, and I encourage engineers, even the most junior engineer. Hey, if you've got ideas, talk about them. If you've got the chance, prototype something, because very good ideas, and we know this is why organisations run hackathons and things like that, can come from any part of the organisation. Now, to your point, there's a whole bunch of them that aren't going to be successful.
Yeah.
In fact, most of them won't. 99 out of 100 won't be.
All right.
But celebrating the little efforts, teaching people the resilience that just because your idea doesn't have traction doesn't mean you should stop having ideas.
Yeah.
Yes, you're in love with this idea. You might think it's great, but hey, there's this commercial reason it's not going to work, and that is a risk. With many engineers, great idea, but it just won't work. And it's not because of frailty of the idea; it's just not the right idea for the business context or something like that. And teaching people resilience to go, okay, cool, I'm going to still keep having ideas. I think that's important as well.
And that goes back to just understanding the commercial acumen as well. Probably like to develop that resilience. If you have that understanding of commercial acumen, you could probably take that hit to my ego. If I had an idea that I thought was going to change the world, but then really understood the business and why it wasn't going to fit for that purpose, I'd be like, okay, cool, great idea, I can move on and
yeah, look, it's I think as an engineer or a technologist, regardless of your career aspirations, there's good stuff and we'll go back to the idea of curiosity, to be curious about, having ideas and then understanding how they might live in the real world is, or being educated on that by people who've got different experiences can be really valuable. So, if you're in a startup these days, or trying to launch a startup, I can't tell you the number of good ideas that I've seen where there is technology that is elegant and well created, but the people haven't necessarily thought about go to market.
Yes.
They haven't thought about, okay, how are we going to convince people to use our product? Product can be great, but if you can't convince people to use it, or you can't convince people to change their behaviour, then it's to what's the purpose of it? Like, what's the impact going to be? And so whether you're in a big company and you say, hey, I've got this technology thing and it's excellent, well, it's got to fit into the real world. If people have to change their behaviour significantly, or there's not an understanding of how we might take this to market, then it doesn't matter that it's good technology. And I think over time, people do build up, the resilience and the understanding of, it's not just about an elegant technology solution. There's more to it.
Yep.
But that can be important.
Mate, that sounds like such good advice. And I think we got some really good things from what you've just discussed there. And I think, that whole thing about just staying curious, and then finding things, using what you've got, like in the company that you're in, to develop an understanding in the people around you. I think that's going to, if you're a developer, even at, just beginning your career, that's going to do wonders for your own sort of personal brand in the business, and working your way up as well and get yourself noticed. And I think it was like That it was Steve Jobs. He did the "Stay Curious, Stay Humble." He stole that from a magazine that he saw on that he used to read.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. "Stay Curious, Stay Humble." It's pretty big. That's how he sort of that was like one of his closing speeches, I think, for Apple. I can't remember, but he stole that from it was a photography magazine that went out of business, and on their last thing, it was "Stay Curious, Stay Humble."
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah. Well, it's great. It's great, and I think for all people. But I've had so much fun listening to this, and it's been great. So thank you so much. I think there's a lot to unpack and a lot for people to sort of take on board.
Terrific. Thanks, Sam. I love talking about this sort of stuff, and I think that that element that just kept coming up around curiosity is a great thing to nurture in people's career.
I found it fascinating as well, just that you didn't have this goal of being a CTO. It was just kind of happened. So it's, I think, like for a lot of people out there, that's if they are genuinely just curious about the business or about themselves, even about how things sort of intertwine together, that things can sort of happen for you along the way.
Yeah, look, I've based my career, and like we started out, I've been incredibly lucky, and I feel privileged, and I thank my lucky stars every day. I think anyone who works in technology probably should feel pretty lucky, because it's great that we get to use our brains and exercise our creativity constantly. And it's stood me really well just to be curious and to take opportunities when they come up, and to learn about things that are happening around me. Just keeping my eyes open has been wonderful.
Awesome. All right, mate. Thanks very much.
Terrific. Thanks, Sam.
Cheers.